I had just taken my service dog, Max, out for his afternoon walk around the neighborhood when it happened. Max, a gentle golden retriever trained to help me with my medical condition, wore his bright blue service vest that clearly read, "Service dog, do not distract." As we passed by one of the HOA board members, someone the neighbors often nicknamed Karen because of her constant nitpicking, she began shouting that dogs weren't allowed on the shared walkway, even though service animals are legally permitted. Before I could respond, she pulled out a spray bottle and deliberately misted Max with some kind of cleaning chemical. Max yelped and backed away. My heart sank. Not only was my health condition at risk if Max couldn't perform his duties, but this was outright cruelty. I immediately rinsed Max with water from my emergency bottle and called the police. When officers arrived, I explained what happened. Karen stood smugly at first, arms crossed, insisting that rules are rules and the HOA doesn't allow animals. But the officer's demeanor shifted as soon as I mentioned Max was a service dog, protected under federal law, the Americans with Disabilities Act. The officers confronted her directly, explaining that interfering with or harming a service dog is a federal crime, punishable by fines and even jail time. Her face went pale. The arrogance melted instantly, and for once, she had nothing to say. Max was treated and recovered fully. The HOA eventually distanced themselves from her behavior, but the incident left a lasting reminder: no one is above the law when it comes to disability rights.
Service dogs are not just companions. They are highly trained working animals that perform specific tasks to assist people with disabilities. Because of their essential role, service dogs are protected by federal law in the United States, most notably under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. The ADA is a civil rights law enacted in 1990 that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and public and private places that are open to the general public. One of the most misunderstood yet critical provisions of this law is the protection given to service animals. These animals are not considered pets, but rather medical aids or tools, comparable to a wheelchair, hearing aid, or any other device that assists a person with a disability in managing daily life. Because of this distinction, businesses, housing authorities, and even homeowners associations are legally required to allow service dogs to accompany their handlers in almost all areas where the general public is permitted. Understanding this protection is essential because it prevents discrimination and ensures equal access. A service dog is trained to perform tasks directly related to the individual's disability. For example, a service dog may guide someone who is blind, alert a person with epilepsy before a seizure occurs, retrieve medication or dropped objects for someone with limited mobility, or even detect changes in blood sugar for a person with diabetes. These tasks are not tricks or conveniences. They can be life-saving. Interfering with a service dog not only violates the law, but can also put the handler's health and safety in immediate danger. If a service dog is harmed, distracted, or prevented from performing its work, the handler could face serious medical consequences. Federal law is very clear on the seriousness of these protections. The ADA states that service animals must be allowed in public spaces, and attempts to exclude, harass, or harm them may constitute a civil rights violation. Beyond the ADA, other federal statutes such as the Air Carrier Access Act, or ACCAA, and the Fair Housing Act, or FHA, also extend protections for individuals with service animals in specific contexts, like air travel and housing. Moreover, under Title 18 of the United States Code, it is a federal crime to intentionally harm or attempt to harm a service animal. Penalties can include fines and imprisonment depending on the severity of the offense. These laws exist because Congress recognized that service animals are not optional or recreational. They are medical necessities for many people with disabilities. Education is often the missing piece when it comes to understanding service dog rights. Many conflicts arise from ignorance, such as someone insisting that no pets rules apply, or demanding documentation that is not legally required. Under federal law, only two questions may be asked about a service animal: whether the dog is a service animal required because of a disability, and what work or task it has been trained to perform. No one can demand to see certification papers, medical records, or proof of training, because no such national registry exists. Requiring unnecessary documentation creates barriers and stigmatizes people with disabilities, which is exactly what the ADA was designed to prevent. It is also important to emphasize that service dogs are distinct from emotional support animals, or ESAs, and therapy animals. While ESAs may provide comfort, they are not trained to perform tasks that mitigate a disability, and therefore do not have the same broad public access rights as service dogs under the ADA. Confusion between these categories sometimes fuels resentment or hostility toward legitimate service dogs, which makes public education all the more important. Ultimately, the federal protections surrounding service dogs exist to ensure that people with disabilities can live independently and safely. Denying access, interfering with their work, or worse, physically harming them is not a minor violation. It is a serious offense with legal consequences. Beyond legality, it is a matter of human dignity and respect. When someone disregards these protections, they are not only disrespecting the law, but also denying a person with a disability the basic right to function safely in society. Understanding and upholding these protections is everyone's responsibility, whether you're a neighbor in an HOA community, a business owner, or simply a member of the public sharing the sidewalk.
Ignorance of the law is one of the most common defenses people attempt to use when they are caught violating the rights of others. But in reality, it is not a defense at all. In the context of service animals and disability rights, claiming that someone didn't know or that they were just following HOA rules does not remove their responsibility. Federal laws, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, the Fair Housing Act, FHA, and others, were written specifically to protect individuals with disabilities from exactly this type of discrimination and mistreatment. These laws override any local rules, policies, or personal preferences. If a homeowners association or business owner says, "We don't allow animals here," that policy immediately becomes invalid the moment a legitimate service animal is involved. No amount of ignorance or stubbornness can erase the fact that federal law takes precedence, and violating it carries real consequences. One of the key reasons ignorance cannot be used as an excuse is because disability rights have been established and publicized for decades. The ADA was signed into law in 1990, which means there has been more than 30 years of opportunity for organizations, businesses, and communities to learn and adapt. The federal government also provides extensive resources and guidance online for anyone who needs clarification. In addition, countless cases over the years have received national attention, spreading awareness about the rights of individuals with service animals. With this much information readily available, it becomes very difficult for anyone to claim they had no idea. Even if someone truly has never heard of the ADA, the principle still applies. Society places the responsibility on individuals to know the law, especially when their actions could harm someone else. Another important factor to consider is that laws regarding service dogs are not just technicalities, they are rooted in human rights and safety. For example, if someone sprays a chemical at a service dog, blocks access to a building, or distracts the dog while it is working, they are not only being rude, but potentially placing the handler's life at risk. The handler may rely on the dog for mobility assistance, medical alerts, or other critical functions. If the dog cannot perform its duties because someone interfered, the handler could suffer injury, illness, or worse. This is why the law treats these cases so seriously. The ADA and related statutes were not designed as optional guidelines. They were designed to protect people with disabilities from harm and to ensure equal participation in daily life. Whether someone understands these principles or not does not change the fact that the law exists to prevent dangerous or discriminatory behavior. It is also worth noting that private organizations, such as homeowners associations, cannot create or enforce rules that violate federal law.
Many HOAs have regulations against pets, but service animals are not considered pets under the ADA. Therefore, a rule banning animals cannot be applied to them. This is a key legal distinction. Even if an HOA member insists they were simply enforcing the rules, the law says that federal protections take priority. An HOA or business that refuses to comply with these protections could face lawsuits, financial penalties, and significant reputational damage. In some cases, individual board members or employees who take action against service animals could also be held personally accountable. The concept that ignorance is no excuse goes beyond service animal laws and applies broadly across all areas of law. If someone drives through a red light and claims they didn't know what the signal meant, they will still receive a ticket. If someone fails to pay taxes and says they didn't realize they had to, the IRS will not accept that as a valid reason. Similarly, when someone interferes with a service dog and then claims they did not know it was illegal, the justice system does not consider that explanation sufficient. The expectation is that all individuals take personal responsibility to understand the basic laws that affect public behavior, especially when those laws protect vulnerable populations. The educational takeaway is that awareness and education are key to preventing these kinds of violations in the first place. Communities, businesses, and organizations should take it upon themselves to learn about disability rights and train their members or employees accordingly. Many conflicts can be avoided if people simply understand that service dogs are not optional companions, but essential medical aids protected by law. By acknowledging that ignorance is not a valid defense, society reinforces the importance of accountability. When people understand that not knowing will not shield them from consequences, they are more likely to educate themselves and respect the rights of others.
The human impact of interfering with a service dog is something many people fail to fully grasp. It is easy for those who have never depended on such an animal to underestimate just how vital they are to their handler's daily life and safety. Service dogs are not luxury companions, and they are not present merely for comfort or emotional support. They are highly trained, working partners whose entire purpose is to perform tasks directly tied to their handler's disability. When someone interferes with that partnership, whether by distracting, harassing, or physically harming the dog, the consequences ripple far beyond a momentary inconvenience. They can affect the handler's physical health, emotional well-being, independence, and overall ability to function safely in society. To understand this impact, it is important to recognize the depth of training service dogs receive. These dogs undergo rigorous programs that can last years, teaching them to stay calm under stress, ignore distractions, and execute precise tasks, such as guiding a blind person through a busy intersection, retrieving life-saving medication, or detecting subtle medical changes like seizures or blood sugar fluctuations. A dog's ability to perform these tasks consistently and reliably can mean the difference between life and death for its handler. If that dog is startled, injured, or becomes fearful because of interference, its capacity to work effectively may be compromised. For the handler, this means increased vulnerability and potential danger in everyday situations. Beyond the physical dangers, there is also a profound psychological toll. People with disabilities often face a constant struggle to assert their rights and navigate environments that are not always accommodating or understanding. Their service dog represents freedom, independence, and confidence. When someone undermines or threatens that bond, it chips away at the sense of security the handler relies on. Imagine depending on your dog to alert you to seizures, and then discovering that the dog has been traumatized by an encounter with an aggressive individual who tried to harm it. Even if the dog recovers, the handler may feel anxiety and fear every time they go out in public, worrying that another person might interfere. This emotional weight compounds the challenges already faced by people with disabilities, turning what should be normal daily activities into sources of stress.
The human impact extends into areas of accessibility and inclusion as well. When people harass or challenge service dogs, they indirectly signal to individuals with disabilities that they are not welcome in certain spaces. This can discourage handlers from going out, engaging with their community, or pursuing employment and educational opportunities. Exclusion and discrimination in these forms can lead to social isolation, economic disadvantage, and diminished quality of life. It becomes not just a matter of one bad interaction, but a broader pattern that erodes equal participation in society. Furthermore, interfering with a service dog disrupts more than just the handler's present moment. It undermines years of training, bonding, and investment. Service dogs are expensive to train, often costing tens of thousands of dollars, and many are provided to handlers through organizations that rely on donations or grants. When a dog is traumatized or injured, the time, money, and emotional energy invested in that partnership can be lost. In extreme cases, a service dog may have to be retired early if it can no longer perform reliably after a traumatic incident. For the handler, this not only means losing a vital partner, but also enduring the long and difficult process of being matched with and training a new dog. It is also important to remember that interference does not have to be physical to cause harm. Even well-meaning behaviors such as calling out to a service dog, trying to pet it, or offering it food can disrupt its focus and prevent it from doing its job. For example, if a person distracts a dog just as it is about to alert its handler to a medical emergency, the consequences could be life-threatening. This is why education about proper etiquette around service animals is so important. People need to understand that the best way to respect both the handler and the dog is to treat the team as a single unit and avoid doing anything that could interfere with their work. The human impact of interference highlights why federal protections are so strong and why violations are treated seriously by law enforcement. Service dogs represent not only assistance, but autonomy, dignity, and safety for people with disabilities. Interfering with them is not a small act. It is a direct attack on the rights and well-being of the person they serve. Recognizing this impact is crucial for building a society that is not only legally compliant, but also compassionate, inclusive, and respectful toward individuals with disabilities.
Accountability and advocacy form the cornerstone of protecting service dogs and the individuals who depend on them. When someone interferes with a service animal, there must be consequences, not only to address the harm done in that moment, but also to send a clear message to society. These violations are serious and will not be tolerated. Without accountability, laws lose their power, and people with disabilities are left vulnerable to mistreatment and exclusion. That is why federal, state, and local authorities take cases involving service animals so seriously, and why it is so important for handlers and allies to advocate for their rights without hesitation. Accountability begins with law enforcement recognizing that interference with a service dog is not a minor dispute, but a legitimate crime. Officers are trained to understand that service animals fall under federal protections, and when someone harms or obstructs them, it is equivalent to obstructing a medical device or physically endangering a person with a disability. When police inform someone that such actions are a federal crime, they are not exaggerating. They are enforcing the ADA and related laws. This legal backing empowers handlers, giving them reassurance that the law is on their side and that they do not need to accept harassment as part of daily life. It also places clear responsibility on offenders, stripping away excuses such as ignorance or just following rules. But accountability is not just about punishing wrongdoers. It is also about ensuring compliance through education and prevention. Businesses, homeowners associations, landlords, and organizations all have a duty to train their staff and members about service animal laws. When they fail to do so, they create environments where violations are more likely to occur. For example, an HOA that does not educate its board members about the difference between pets and service animals is practically inviting conflict.
In such cases, accountability should extend to the organization itself, not just the individual who committed the act. Lawsuits, financial penalties, and public exposure often serve as the wake-up call that institutions need to implement proper policies and training. Advocacy plays an equally important role in this process. Individuals with service animals should never feel they must stay silent or endure mistreatment to avoid confrontation. Reporting violations is not only about personal justice, it protects others by discouraging future offenders. Each time a handler asserts their rights, they reinforce the visibility of disability protections and remind communities that these laws matter. Advocacy can take many forms, from filing complaints with the Department of Justice to simply educating a misinformed neighbor about why service animals cannot be treated as pets. In many cases, advocacy is what turns a moment of ignorance into an opportunity for understanding and growth. Beyond legal channels, advocacy also involves public awareness. The more society as a whole understands the role of service dogs, the less likely it is that handlers will face discrimination or harassment. Advocacy groups, nonprofits, and disability rights organizations work tirelessly to spread information through campaigns, educational programs, and outreach efforts. Their work helps to normalize the presence of service dogs and reduce stigma, ensuring that when handlers are out in public, they are met with respect rather than suspicion. Every story that highlights the consequences of violating service dog protections adds to this awareness, showing that these are not abstract issues, but real challenges faced by people every day. Personal accountability is another critical piece of the puzzle. Members of the public must take it upon themselves to learn the basics of service animal etiquette and law. Something as simple as resisting the urge to pet a service dog, refraining from asking invasive questions about a disability, or supporting a handler when they face discrimination contributes to a culture of respect. When individuals commit to being allies rather than obstacles, communities become safer and more inclusive for people with disabilities. Ultimately, accountability and advocacy ensure that the protections written into federal law are not just words on paper, but living principles that shape society. Without accountability, offenders walk away unpunished, and others feel emboldened to do the same. Without advocacy, violations go unchallenged and awareness stagnates. Together, however, they form a powerful cycle. Accountability deters harmful behavior, while advocacy educates and builds understanding. For service dog handlers, this means that not only are their rights recognized, but that their independence, safety, and dignity are respected in practice. The message must be clear. Harming or interfering with a service dog is not a trivial matter. It is a violation of civil rights, and both the law and the community will stand up against it.